first episode of the Nothing New Under the Sun podcast. My name is Talia and I am so excited to get started. You know those moments in life when you're literally just wondering, like, have I done something wrong? Did I do the right thing? Did I overreact? Am I the bad guy? Am I the good guy? Everyone has those moments, right? On this podcast, we are going to be diving headfirst into each and every one of those moments, and we're going to be taking some time with a little help from Reddit's AITA, the butthole stories, and of course, some good old biblical wisdom. We're going to have a look at all the messy and the complicated and honestly sometimes just hilarious situations that make us human. And what we're going to do is we're going to see what God has to say about each of them. I'd like you to think of this a little bit like a Bible study. It's a Bible study with some twists, some turns, and some real life juicy drama. So if that sounds like it's right up your alley, if that sounds like it's what you're into, I'd like you to grab your drinks, grab your snacks, grab your earphones, do what you're doing. Let's get started. In this episode, we are going to be tackling two kind of very specific themes. We're going to be talking about two separate things. We're going to be talking about forgiveness and we're going to be talking about boundaries. These are two things that sometimes can seem opposing, but to be quite honest with you, I find that they tend to go hand in hand. So let's dive into our story for the day. The story says, AITA for telling my family no more to monthly family dinners. Damn. It says, ever since my dad was a kid, our family has done monthly family dinners, nicer ones than your average family dinner. Okay. It's something our family did when my siblings and I were kids too. We'd have grandparents over and we'd all have a nice dinner together. When my siblings and I grew up, we still did it, only instead of what happened before, where branches broke off over time and did their own, they decided we should include partners and spouses and our kids as a whole in one. By the time I was 19, the family had decided they would take turns hosting each month to lessen the burden. My wife was excited to be part of them at first. We started during our relationship. I did the cooking to start and then she took over after a while because she wanted to. My family had seemingly got along with my wife before this point, but they were overly harsh of her cooking with the exception of my two younger siblings. She tried to make them happy, but nothing. I told them they could be kinder. They said she should cook better or cook different things. My wife didn't make anything they don't eat, but nothing was right. She grew frustrated and I grew suspicious. So we hosted a couple months ago and I told my wife we were going to pretend I did the cooking, just to see. She told me she felt like they just weren't fond of her food. I pointed out nobody had the same amount of complaints as them and they even criticized the steak and potatoes that they all seemed to go crazy for. She went along with the plan and when my family thought I'd cooked it, they loved it. Said it was so good, my wife had decided to let the real talent take over. My younger brother and sister weren't fooled, but they enjoyed watching the rest of the family dig a hole. When the rest of my family heard it was my wife's food and not mine, they tried so hard to backtrack on all the nice stuff. The rest of the dinner went in tense silence and my wife's eyes were opened. I told her I was done with these dinners and she was my priority. She felt a little bad. I told her we could have dinners with my younger brother and sister sometimes. It's less stress anyway. When we didn't show up to last month's dinner or this one, my parents and siblings started asking questions. I told them each time we weren't going again, but missing two made it sink in. They told me we need to be there. I said, never again. My wife doesn't deserve their disrespect. I told them they ruined what they wanted by being bumholes to her. She said I was overreacting, making very relationship-harming choices and treating them badly for simply having issues with my wife's food. They also said to think of future kids and how they'll miss out. Some of it got to my wife a little, which I've tried to reassure her about. AITA. Before we get into the biblical study of all of this, one thing that I will say, this guy seems like the most supportive husband. He is understanding of her and he is behind her every step of the way, even when it comes to the people that really are probably near and dear to his heart. And I really, really admire that. I do think, from reading this entire story, I do think that this has nothing to do with your wife's cooking. This has nothing to do with your wife's ability to cook. She might be a great cook, she might be a terrible cook, but this has nothing to do with it. This has to do with the fact that your family seem to want to tear down your wife. And that is something that you really need to look at and evaluate as to whether that's something that you want around your wife and the family that you're going to create. Another thing, I think you did really well when it came to setting a boundary with them and saying, because of how you treated my wife, this is what's going to happen. The important thing about boundaries is that you must stick to them. And they must be clear. If you're going to tell somebody, if you do A, B, C, the consequence is X, Y, Z. And you have to follow through with that. This guy did a great job of following through with that. I don't know if that's something just because he's really good at setting boundaries in the first place, or is it because it really did upset him the way that his family was behaving towards his wife. I do think your wife also handled herself really well. Your wife has so much grace for these people, despite the fact that they've shown themselves time and time again, and I really do think that that's really admirable. It's actually quite beautiful. Top comment. NTA. It's pretty clear the issue isn't her food, it's her. For whatever reason, they don't seem to like her. Good for you for standing up to them. And he responds, having that confirmed sucked badly, but I wasn't going to pretend it was okay to treat her this way either. They wouldn't come right out and say it. They tried to hide behind the food. Which, to be quite honest with you, I'm not surprised. I think sometimes it can be really hard. Not to say that they are justified in any way, but I think it can be really hard to embrace a whole new person into the family, especially if you don't think that it's the right person for the member of your family. However, that does not then mean that they have license to mistreat her, which is absolutely what they've been doing. They've been dogging on her food and her cooking skill and her talent just because they don't like her as a person. Honestly, you chose her, they should suck it up. This story, to be quite honest, instantly reminded me of that Bible verse. It is Ephesians 4:32, which says, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving one another just as in Christ God forgave you." Part of the Lord's Prayer says, "Forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who trespass against us." The love and forgiveness of God is never conditional. God is never ever conditional with how much he forgives us and how much grace he has with us, because he is such a loving God. The grace that you give out should be equal to the grace that you receive. The forgiveness that you can give to others for the things that they do is even just a fraction of the amount of forgiveness that God gives us, but it is an example of how we should be. Think about how much we do or don't forgive those who actually trespass against us. It's actually not that much. And I think that part of the Lord's Prayer serves as a reminder that every single person deserves grace. And who are we to not give them grace, even though we also sometimes need grace for the things that we do? Let it be known, forgiveness does not negate consequences. I'm going to say it again. Forgiveness does not negate consequences. Forgiving someone doesn't mean that there aren't consequences for their actions. If somebody breaks your trust, if somebody does something against you, forgiveness might look like just saying something like, "I'm not holding this against you, but I need you to respect my boundaries going forward." Sometimes we like to think that love means being accepting of everything. However, passive acceptance can be the worst gift that you can give somebody. Passive acceptance means I accept everything that you do, regardless of the consequences, regardless of how it makes me feel, regardless of what it does to other people. And passive acceptance is the most dangerous thing that you can do for somebody that you love. So if you love somebody, it means you have to draw firm lines. God draws firm lines with us. God has boundaries for us. We call them the 10 Commandments. God has a line for whereby we must not step outside of that line, because once we step outside of that line, those actions that we commit have consequences. Forgiveness and love comes from having firm boundaries and exercising firm boundaries. Having boundaries does not mean that you no longer love somebody. And if somebody ever tries to treat you as if your boundaries mean that you no longer love them, they don't love you. Love also means accepting the boundaries of other people. If you find that you're in a place where somebody has a boundary that you don't like, it is not your place to exercise or to think about or to examine whether or not you accept their boundary. When it comes to setting boundaries with people, especially the people that you love, sometimes having love for somebody or honoring somebody also means being honest with them about what it is that they have done that hurt you, or what it is that is actually hurting you in that moment. Having love and honoring somebody means creating the space to heal. This is not to say that this is something that is easy to do, but if you love them, it is worth it. Loving somebody means being honest with them about their actions, being clear with them about the consequences, and creating the space for you to heal from whatever it is that can hurt you or has hurt you. For the person in the story, I would say that if the family members choose to show remorse, not only do you give them grace regardless of their response, but if they do someday decide, we're sorry for how we treated your wife, we're sorry for how we behaved, it will not happen again, then forgiveness, while it's already hard enough, also happens to coincide with starting to rebuild trust. Rebuilding trust is one of the hardest challenges you might ever have to face, especially if somebody you love has hurt you. One thing I will say is the ones you love can sometimes hurt you the most because they're the closest to you. And sometimes we tend to have higher expectations for those that are closer to us. Forgiveness and trust are also imperative for a healthy and lasting relationship. Let's talk about what this forgiveness and trust might look like. Let's take Jesus, for example. Jesus forgave people all the time, and yet he didn't always trust them straight away after forgiving them. In John 2:24, it says, "But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people." Jesus knows each and every one of our hearts, and as a result, he did not trust some of the people to do him right, which is okay. It's understandable. Forgiveness is about letting go of the hurt, but trust is something that has to be rebuilt. It's okay to take a step back, especially if it means that you're protecting your heart while you take the time to heal. And please make sure that while you're doing this, you are doing this for the purpose of taking the time to heal, and not for another purpose that is not going to serve you nor the other person. Essentially, I would hope that this story and what we've gotten from the Bible teaches us so much about forgiveness and boundaries and how they really do go together. Forgiveness is all about freeing yourself from pain and envy and bitterness. And yet boundaries are all about protecting your peace. And both of these things can and will exist together. So, whether it's a sibling who messed up, a parent that hurt you, or a friend that's let you down, There's always room for grace. But grace does not mean letting people take advantage of you, because even God's love comes with healthy boundaries, like I said before. So maybe the question isn't, am I the a-hole? But maybe the question rather should be, am I handling this with wisdom and grace and love? That's the challenge for all of us. Not only just this week, but till the end of time. When you go into a situation, rather than thinking, am I wrong? Am I this? Am I the bad guy? Just think, am I handling this situation with wisdom, with grace, and with love? Now, your turn. What do you think? Do you think this person had a right to set the boundaries that he did? Do you think that he should have just let it go? Have you yourself ever struggled to forgive someone while still also struggling with protecting your own peace? Feel free to send in all your thoughts. Feel free to comment on our Instagram. I would love to start featuring some of your own stories in future episodes. You can reach out on Instagram. It is nothingnew_UTS_pod. So don't forget to follow us on Instagram so that you never miss a post, never miss an episode, and constantly get updates. Thank you so much for being here for my very first episode of Nothing New Under the Sun podcast. I'm really excited to get into more messy and real life situations with you. But please remember, forgiveness isn't about letting people walk all over you, and boundaries aren't about shutting people out. Both of them are about love. Love for others and love for yourself. Until next time, take care, be kind, and keep asking the important questions. And I will see you soon. Bye.